Welcome to episode 2 of Project 250, a weekly chronicle of the people, the places, and the events of the American Revolution, in the order they occurred. So, without further ado, here's what was happening 250 years ago this week, January 8th to 14th, 1775. Last week, as you recall, England's King George III and his chief advisor Lord North faced the prospect of open rebellion among his North American colonies. At Cambridge, Massachusetts, Hannah Winthrop wrote to her friend Mercy Otis Warren, expressing concerns over the devastating impact of the Boston Port Act and other aspects of the King's policy of coercion. Prominent Virginia planter, George Washington, was playing host to former British officer, Charles Lee. The New York Journal reported that 2 British men-of-war had been ordered to Texel in an attempt to prevent the shipment of arms to the rebellious colonies. Finally, at Salem County, New Jersey, the local committee of observation approved a petition urging neighboring counties to establish their own committees of observation and a committee of correspondence. We start this week in Boston, where a loyalist newspaper, the Massachusetts Gazette, publishes a letter that is highly critical of the Patriot cause. The letter, written under the pen name Massachusettensis and addressed to the inhabitants of the province of the Massachusetts Bay, presents a strong case for loyalism. It offers a severe critique of the specious Patriot arguments that the colonists, not being represented in Parliament, are therefore not subject to its authority. Massachusettensis goes on to condemn such arguments in the most strenuous terms.
The supposition of our being independent states, or exempt from the authority of Parliament, destroys the very idea of our having a British Constitution. Thus the argument that is drawn from their first principle of our being entitled to English liberties destroys the principle itself. It deprives us of the English Bill of Rights, and all the benefits resulting from the revolution of English laws, and of the British Constitution.
As far as Massachusettensis was concerned, the colonists' grievance was not that they were subject to the authority of Parliament, but rather that they had no actual representation in it. To this, Massachusettensis replied that the colonists' lack of representation was not due to any deliberate British high-handedness, as had often been alleged, but was strictly a matter of practicality, the colonies being too far away to allow for such direct representation. In any event, that was no excuse for disloyalty. Indeed, given the benefits the colonies derived from the empire, it was in their best interest to remain a part of the empire as well as their duty to remain loyal to the authority of Parliament. What few knew at the time was that Massachusettensis's true identity was Daniel Leonard, a prominent loyalist and lawyer from Taunton, Massachusetts. Member of a wealthy family, Leonard had started out as a patriot but had gradually grown disillusioned by what he regarded as the duplicity of Patriot leaders. Leonard's appointment to the Governor's Council, in 1774, following the passage of the Massachusetts Government Act, which abolished local elections, further angered patriots who regarded it as a violation of their right to elect their leaders. In August 1774, when a mob attacked his home in Taunton, Leonard fled to Boston and the protection of the British Army. Shortly after, in December 1774, Leonard began writing the Massachusettensis letters, composing 17 in all between December 1774 and April 1775. Meanwhile, in Charleston, the South Carolina Provincial Congress meets for the first time on January 11th. Among the attendees was Francis Salvador, a plantation owner from the Carolina upcountry. A relative newcomer to America, Salvador had emigrated from England in December 1773 and settled in the 96th district, where he acquired about 7,000 acres and a sizable slave workforce. Despite being a new arrival, Salvador rose quickly within the ranks of Carolina society, making friends with several Southern notables, including Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, John Rutledge, William Henry Drayton, Henry Laurens, and Samuel Hammond. These connections helped Salvador and his friend, Richard Rapley, win election as delegates to South Carolina's Provincial Congress, He was assigned to several important committees, including the committee tasked with drafting a new constitution for South Carolina. More impressive than these accomplishments was the fact that Francis Salvador was Jewish, the first Jew elected to public office in what would become the United States, an achievement made even more remarkable by the fact that Jews were actually banned from voting and holding office in South Carolina at the time. Finally, our attention shifts once again to New Jersey, where Royal Governor and ardent Tory William Franklin, in his address to the New Jersey Provincial Assembly, delivers a stark warning regarding the dangers of rebellion in light of recent events during which patriot mobs had employed threats, intimidation, and similar tactics against their loyalist opponents and even against those patriots who were deemed to be insufficiently zealous in their devotion to the cause, saying,
"It is not for me to decide on the particular merits of the dispute between Great Britain and her colonies, nor do I mean to censure those who conceive themselves aggrieved for aiming at a redress of their grievances. All that I wish to guard you against is the giving any countenance or encouragement to that destructive mode of proceeding which has been unhappily adopted in part by some of the inhabitants of this colony, and has been carried so far in others as totally to subvert their former constitution."
Franklin further warned that should the Assembly members approve such measures, they would be doing everything in their power to undermine the very government that they were duty-bound to defend. As the people's legal representatives, the Assembly could not countenance such a violation of the powers vested in them by the Constitution. Furthermore, Franklin assured the Assembly that there was no call for such extreme measures, telling them that any grievances they wished to present to the king would be properly attended to. Indeed, Franklin argued that any such representations or propositions would certainly carry more weight coming from individual colonies than through a channel of questionable propriety and legality, a thinly veiled dig at the Continental Congress. As he ended his address, Franklin resorted to even harsher words as he lectured the Assembly.
"You have now pointed out to you gentlemen two roads, one evidently leading to peace, happiness, and a restoration of the public tranquility, the other inevitably conducting you to anarchy, misery, and all the horrors of a civil war. Your wisdom, your prudence, your regard for the true interests of the people will be best known when you have shown to which road you give the preference. If to the former, you will probably afford satisfaction to the moderate, the sober, and the discreet part of your constituents. If to the latter you will, perhaps, for a time, give pleasure to the warm, the rash, and the inconsiderate among them."
While undoubtedly sincere, Franklin's rhetoric could just as easily apply to his relationship with his father, Benjamin Franklin. Born out of wedlock, his mother's identity remains unknown. William's loyalty to the crown was rooted in a strong desire for legitimacy and contrasted sharply with the radicalism of his father, whose own loyalty had been shattered by his humiliation before the Privy Council. At one point, the senior Franklin pointedly wrote to his son, saying,
"Parliament has no right to make any law whatever bind on the colonies. I know your sentiments differ from mine on these subjects. You are a thorough government man."
In time, this disagreement would into an unbridgeable rift between the two men that in many ways mirrored the growing discord as the Revolution divided families and communities just as it divided England and her colonies. And that's the way it was 250 years ago this week. If you enjoyed this video, please tell a friend. Also, if you like what you see, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter, or X or whatever they're calling themselves these days. Thank you for watching.